Hi y'all, and welcome to part 2 of my Traitor Ace duology. If you haven't seen part 1, I would recommend watching that one first before this, because it explains the basis of Traitor Ace theory and why it's come back after being dead for like 2 years. I hate to assign required reading, but I'm going to be building on what I covered in part 1, so yeah. Everyone has their own ideas of how Ace could potentially betray you, and we've talked about what evidence there is to support a betrayal or deem it impossible, but to be honest, there's only one way I can really see Ace betraying you. While Ace very much cares for you, I think this affection would be a huge factor in his downfall if Traitor Ace theory ends up being a thing. He loves you, again, romantically or platonically is up to you, but the dude is so terrible with his feelings. He suppresses things, he's bad at talking about his feelings, he's abrasive, he's too concerned with looking cool. I think if Ace betrays you, the betrayal would be stopping them from going home, and it would be the result of him snapping due to jealousy and emotional issues. I know for most people who are familiar with this theory, this probably seems out of left field, but I'm gonna break it down in very fine detail. So let's start off analyzing Ace as a character. Ace is a very interesting character because while he's really bad at feelings, it still tells us quite a bit about him. Ace is the king of deflecting when people even just casually mention his feelings. And I don't necessarily mean king as in he's good at it, to be honest, he's actually kind of bad at it. But without fail, he will always try to deflect and make up excuses. During Spectral Soiree, when Lilia and Malleus point out that Ace must have been lonely without Yuu, Deuce, and Grimm, he immediately insists that they're not really his friends and he only tolerates them. This is right after he admitted when he thought he was alone that he missed them and was worried about them. When Malleus points out that Ace isn't really scared of him, Ace panics and tries to deflect. When Ace gives a little kid a collectible card he wanted, Lilia tells him that it was nice. And Ace then goes on to make up all these elaborate reasons of why it wasn't nice actually, and he just did it because blah 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 blah. And then Ghost Marriage has like several examples of Ace just not being great with communication. When Grimm accuses Ace of not being genuine with his whole call-out monologue to Eliza during Ghost Marriage's climax, Ace is like, yeah, of course, totally, I wasn't sincere. And is very poorly covering up that, yeah, he was genuine with calling Eliza out. Hell, even when Ace gets bored of his first girlfriend, he doesn't bother to tell her that they're done, he just ghosts her. Ace is garbage at communication, and when his feelings or motivations are brought up, he deflects, he lies, he does everything he can to either change the subject or convince the other person that no, he's not genuine and kind, what are you talking about? This is a consistent pattern of behavior that Ace does. He gets called nice for something and he immediately tries to dispel it. And like, his friends aren't immune to being on the receiving end of this. During Terror is Trending, Yuu tells Ace in front of Floyd and Jamil that it made them happy that Ace talked to the ramshackle ghost to get them in Grimm Halloween costumes. Ace's immediate reaction is, don't read too much into it, and he only did it because it would be pathetic if 2 people got left out. In EN, I would argue the translation for Yuu's dialogue makes this sting a lot more, because Yuu says, I was flattered you cared enough to talk to the ghost for us, because that makes it sound like Yuu doesn't really feel like Ace cares about them all that much. And for people wondering, the literal Japanese translation is, oh, it made me happy you talked to the ghosts. Like, that's literally what they say. And to be honest, I wouldn't really blame them if they felt that way, of Ace not really caring for them all that much. While going through voice lines and stuff, I could really only find one line where Ace was upfront about worrying about you. Ace, 9 times out of 10, dodges his feelings, and while it's clear to us as readers he cares about you, he's a lot more guarded in his feelings than, say, Deuce. He always has to make an excuse for the acts of kindness he does, as if he's not comfortable being seen as nice or caring, as if he's embarrassed by the sheer thought of earnestness. And especially in front of his senpais, he's going to make sure he doesn't look too nice. Perhaps if Yuu had thanked Ace when he was alone, he would have had a different answer, but the fact that Yuu thanked him in front of Floyd and Jamil makes me wonder if his somewhat harsh response was because he didn't want the sophomores thinking he was soft or something. Because unfortunately, Ace cares about how people see him. I think some of the examples I gave for him not being great at communication double as evidence for him trying to look cooler. Although, to be honest, I think cooler is subjective. I think being earnest and caring is cool, but like, I don't know what goes on in teenage boys' minds. All they do is play WoW, eat hot chip, and lie. But anyways, Ace takes great pains in appearing cool and unaffected. Like I said, I gave a whole slew of instances where he tries to appear more detached to others by lying out his ass. The most obvious of these is Ace giving some kid a collectible card. For those who haven't read that vignette, Ace and a few other basketball club members are at a cafe where there's some collab going on and you get cards with your food. Ace pulls this card this little kid was sad about not getting, so Ace gave it to him. Lilia, who Ace is telling the story to, tells him that that was a kind thing to do, and Ace, immediately starts making excuses. Lilia wasn't imparting any judgment, really. I mean, if anything, he seemed pleased Ace was being nice. It wasn't like Lilia making fun of him, but Ace was still so uncomfortable with Lilia's response that he had to try and convince Lilia that it wasn't nice of him, actually. It was just convenient for him to do it. And then we have other examples that I haven't even touched on yet. In his school voice lines, he talks about taking great pains in choosing outfits and color coordinating. I don't think I really need to dissect this. This is something people who care about their appearance do. In his Suitor suit lines, he talks about finding overt love declarations from movies and TV shows and etc. super embarrassing. While I definitely think this also plays into his aversion to communication, to me it more signifies the fact he doesn't like the earnestness and the massive amount of vulnerability you'd have to have with someone to have that kind of love confession. Being that sincere in his eyes isn't cool, and it's mortifying to be like that in front of someone else, especially someone you're in love with. One of his groovy lines talks about how he's gonna get cooler, which to me implies 1, he already thinks he's cool, fair, and 2, he's constantly growing towards being even cooler. I guess this means he thinks he has room for improvement? But whether it's he thinks he's not cool enough or he knows other people don't think he's cool, I'm not sure. Maybe it's both. Ace doesn't lack self-confidence, but he wants validation. He craves validation that he's super duper cool. Loads of his lines have him trying to fish for compliments, for lack of a better phrase. Put a pin in this because we're going to come back to it later. And I will say most of these lines that have Ace trying to get compliments are voice lines where he's talking to you. They're not necessarily event storylines. I think he generally wants validation and acceptance from others, but a lot of those lines are specifically talking to you. He doesn't only want validation from his classmates that he's a cool guy, he also really wants it from you. Ace is one of Yuu's best friend and a member of Yuu's main friend group alongside Deuce and Grimm. I won't be talking too much about Grimm in this video essay. I'd rather focus on ADeuceYuu because this dynamic is what fuels most of my interpretation of the Traitor Ace theory. They're all good friends, of course, and together they have an interesting dynamic. But the vibe between Ace, Deuce, and Yuu is just as interesting, and I think it says a lot about the three of them. And it's these dynamics that would play a huge part in a theoretical betrayal on Ace's part. And before we begin, I just want to say a disclaimer. I love ADeuceYuu, but I know the stuff I'm about to say might sound super negative, so I just want to say that, yeah, they're all friends and genuinely care about each other, but there's some sus things in there, and I think those sus things specifically are what would play into making the Traitor Ace theory happen. I don't think this is the ultimate ADeuceYuu analysis that's 100% canon for realsies, for sure Yana told me so. I'm focusing on things that could lead to Ace snapping, so if you're confused as to why I'm not talking about more positive aspects of their friendship, that's why. Only darkness and depression here, baby. So let's start with Ace and Deuce. They're obviously friends, but let's be real here, things can get rocky between them at times. Deuce's kindness and openness gets on Ace's nerves or straight up puts Ace in a bad position, like inviting Riddle to Playful Land and nearly getting Ace in a load of trouble. Ace complains about Deuce a lot but still invites him to do things. The two also consider each other rivals, as stated in promotional material. Ace has gone on record saying he's competitive and that he wants to get more of a lead on other people. Deuce is very much one of those people he's competing with. During both Lost in the Book with Stitch and Stage in Playful Land, he tells you that they need to brag to Deuce about having fun together without him. To me, it feels like Ace telling Deuce, LMAO, I got to spend time with you and we were just fine without you, clearly I'm winning. And I should also mention, Deuce says something very similar about Ace during White Rabbit Fest to Yuu, saying they need to tell Ace they had fun without him. It low-key makes me wonder if perhaps that competitive streak extends into their relationship with Yuu, and Ace wants to be the closer friend to Yuu. Again, put a pin in that, we're coming back to it later. To be honest, Ace and Deuce are very similar to each other. Deuce does care somewhat about how others perceive him, but it's a lot more of a rare occurrence. Really, the only time we've seen this is during White Rabbit Festival, where Deuce is embarrassed to wear the costume his mom borrowed for him. In his Dance and Wishes vignette, Deuce talks about how he used to think being detached was cool when he was in middle school, and that he grew up and realized there's no shame in caring about things and being earnest. Ace, on the other hand, yeah, he definitely still has that mentality. We spent 5 minutes talking about it. And they also have this interesting dichotomy where Ace is pretty closed off with feelings while Deuce wears his heart on his sleeve far more. Does Deuce try to avoid things? 100%. But in general, he's much more open with his emotions than Ace is. And because of this, some of us label Deuce as the nice one. And more importantly, I think it gives the impression that Deuce and Yuu are closer to each other than Ace and Yuu are by the simple virtue of Deuce is more open and outwardly kind to Yuu. Something Deuce does a lot that Ace doesn't do is talk about his past. It feels like he has a lot of voice lines where he talks about his family and his life with you, and that's not to say Ace has none, because he definitely does have some. But Deuce has more, or at least it feels like Deuce has more. Not to mention, Deuce's feel like him sharing information, and Ace's feel like my brother is so cool, which that's a whole other story, but anyways. Deuce, when talking about his future, includes you in that future. When he talks about wanting to become a cop, he tells you he wants them to be there to celebrate with him. He says this like twice, both in a Star-Sending Robe's voice line and in his vignette. Deuce is planning for you to be around him well into adulthood, but also to remain close friends with them past graduation. He also says that he can't wait to show you how sharp he's gonna look wearing that uniform, which... Fellas, that seems a little not platonic. And also, to go back to Ace and Deuce for a moment, because I realized this while revising the first rough draft, but it contrasts a lot with Deuce saying he's gonna show you how good he looks and he isn't overtly asking for a compliment, compared to Ace, who tells you that he's waiting to be told he looks good in his Galaga tour. Okay, but back to Deuce and you. Deuce has no problem being earnest and straightforward with you. When they're at the Promising Young Mages social, he has no problem asking you for a dance and he treats it super casually. He doesn't treat it like a super big deal. He's like, oh hey, let's just have the next dance, after you're done dancing with Malleus. I think we all know Ace would have not been straightforward about it and would have had to tack on something like, just because you look sad on your own, or something. Deuce is also pretty straightforward with compliments. During White Rabbit Fest, Deuce tells you, if they say he looks cool, that they look cool with a very affectionate look on his face. Deuce is also pretty loyal to you, getting angry with Riddle when Riddle insulted you in Book 1. He genuinely wants to help you out, and in a few voice lines, tells them if they ever need help with things, to go to him. He's very vulnerable and open with you. It's clear his delinquent phase is something he's deeply ashamed of, but he still talks about it with you and lets himself be open when talking about regret and how horrible he feels about the past. And even beyond letting himself be vulnerable with them, it also indicates to me that he has a level of trust with you to even be open about this in the first place. They have a long heart-to-heart about his past in his White Rabbit Fest vignette, and frankly, I don't know if he would have been that open with you if he didn't trust them completely. Like, during Deuce's Bloom birthday vignette, when the topic of his past comes up, Deuce tries to be as vague as he possibly can with the circumstances, because while Deuce embraces vulnerability with you, it not only says he's comfortable with them enough to do that, but that he trusts them deeply to let them know everything, even the things he's ashamed of. Deuce very clearly cares about you, and he's not afraid to let his affection show. He's open and trusts them deeply, and I'm not saying he doesn't trust Ace or anything, but the way he loves you is very different from how Ace loves you. Where Deuce is soft towards you and emotionally open, Ace is not. I wouldn't call him soft like Deuce is. He definitely has his moments of being soft, but they're rare and have a wildly different vibe from Deuce. For example, when Yuu gets a vision of Maleficent at Lilia's farewell party and isn't feeling well, although the other freshmen are concerned, Ace is the one to go to Deuce and say, "Hey, Deuce, you seems kind of under the weather. We should head out once we've said our hellos," implying that they're going to help you back to Ramshackle. He's honestly very protective of you. When Riddle insults you and calls them stupid and mocks their lack of magic, Ace's first reaction is to immediately throw a punch. Deuce and Ace were both furious, but it's Ace that acts first. I know some people might attribute his punch to him just being more and more furious with Riddle, but I'd like to semi-counter with the fact that this was Ace's breaking point. Riddle had been a jerk leading up to this, but his comment about you is what caused Ace to snap. I think it can be a it's both situation. Not to mention, during Lost in the Book with Stitch, when he thinks they're about to be ambushed, his first instinct is to tell you to run to safety, even though they've been in a lot of fights before. It's not like this isn't something they couldn't handle. But Ace's first thought is to get you to safety and telling them to run and don't look back while he fends off the robots. He does tell you to get Riddle and the others to back him up, which while yeah he needs backup, you has seen and been in their fair share of fights. Him not letting you do any fighting is clearly him trying to protect them. If he just wanted backup, he could have told Grimm to go run to the cottage, or just you. But no, he tells you, and also Grimm, to run to safety. He doesn't want to take any risks that you could get hurt and tells them to go. Ace is the only freshman to have had dated someone, and to be honest, there's a lot of parallels with Ace's ex-girlfriend and you. I'm sure this is partially done for the Yumeis, but the amount of things and the specificity is enough to make me question if it's just Yume bait or something else. Ace complained that his ex never wanted to ride thrill rides like roller coasters, and what do he and you do? Ride a roller coaster in Playful Land. Hell, if you have you say that they loved it, he'll say that they should ride it again later in the day, just the two of them. He says his ex never wanted to watch action or horror movies with him. In Idia's Labwear vignette, Ace and Yuu are watching a horror movie together. I mean, Grimm's there, so it isn't just the two of them, but still. In the end, Ace's main complaint is that his girlfriend wasn't interested in the things he was, and Ace seemed to be the one to compromise. Doesn't excuse the ghosting, though. But Yuu, on the other hand, is interested in a lot of the things he is, or they're at least willing to put up with it for Ace. And considering how, vocal Yuu can be about things, I would think if they didn't like it, they would absolutely talk back to Ace. And that leads us to a very interesting aspect of their relationship. Ace and Yuu will usually throw it right back in the other person's face if the other says something they're not down with. We saw this as early as Chapter 1, where Ace asks to sleep over at Ramshackle and wants to share a bed with Yuu, who will tell him to sleep on the sofa. This happens a total of 2 times, by the way, and each time Yuu tells him that sharing a bed is never gonna happen. Honestly, Ace and Yuu can be a little nasty with each other. There's 2 voice lines from Ace where he's fishing for compliments. Remember that first pen I had y'all made? We're talking about it now. For his Suitor suit line, his response makes it clear that Yuu said he looked nice and then laughed or did something to make that seem insincere. There's also a level up voice line where Ace says, "I never thought I'd be into your type," which is already kind of a terrible thing to say, but then he makes it worse by being like, "LOL JK, I don't like you like that." For the most part, Deuce and Yuu don't really do this. Yuu can be a little mean to Deuce, like asking him if he even has a forte during his star-sending robes lines, but that's really the only direct line I could find. There is a moment in White Rabbit Fest where Yuu can call Deuce cute, and it's clear he doesn't like being called that and in turn calls Yuu cute too, but even then, that doesn't have the same vibe as Ace and Yuu. Not to mention, I feel like the line is so vague that I think you can't really say if Yuu is saying it to be a little shit or if they're being genuine. And this cycles back to Deuce and Yuu being softer with each other than Ace and Yuu are. Ace and Yuu will roast each other, and to be honest, I think it gets actually mean-spirited at times. There's also the fact that because Ace is bad at communication, while it's clear he cares for Yuu, his lack of being open leads him to saying things that aren't super nice. Like the whole costume thing, he says don't read too much into it and trying to deflect that he cares. And there's also the fact that Ace dances around more vulnerable questions. He straight up doesn't want to talk about his dreams for the future in his school uniform lines, but Deuce absolutely talks about it. At some points, it feels like Ace is keeping Yuu at arm's length, and it makes me wonder if this isn't just Ace being bad at feelings and saying not great things. I wonder if part of it is some defense mechanism because after all, if he and Yuu don't get close, it won't hurt when they leave, or if this is all because of his aversion to being sincere and open. Hell, it could even be both. In the end, I think all these factors do more damage to his and Yuu's friendship than I think most people realize. Like again, the whole "I was flattered you cared enough." Like, I know probably on some level Ace and Yuu know that they're kind of joking with each other, but let's be real, even if you're like meanly joking with people, sometimes that shit does hurt. And to be honest, I also wonder if Ace considers Deuce and Yuu to be closer friends than him and Yuu, or if he thinks deep down Yuu is just lukewarm to him or something. One of his Suitor suit voice lines is him immediately just going, "You think I look ridiculous," and not to mention him being irritated with Yuu and their lack of sincerity with compliments, which honestly, that's big fair. Yuu absolutely talk shit unprovoked, it's true, but they do it more to Ace than they do Deuce. I'm just speculating, but I wonder if Ace sees this discrepancy and it feeds into some negative emotions. Like I mentioned, he wants validation from Yuu, and they're not exactly handing it out easy. I don't even know if Ace really realizes it yet, but I think deep down he's insecure about his relationship to Yuu, and it's feeding into his competitive nature and craving for validation. It's time to talk about that second pin. Ace openly admits in his PE uniform groovification line that he's competitive, even though he probably doesn't seem like it. He and Deuce canonically have a rivalry going on, although they're still friends, and to me, it seems like sometimes that rivalry seeps into their friendship with Yuu. I kinda mentioned this earlier. Both of them do this thing of like, if Ace is on a trip with Yuu and Deuce isn't with them, he says they need to brag about how much fun they had without Deuce. Deuce also does this when it's him and Yuu together without Ace. However, what's interesting is that Ace has done this twice, whereas Deuce has only done it once. Ace said something along these lines in both Stage and Playful Land and Lost in the Book with Stitch. Deuce, on the other hand, has only said it during White Rabbit Fest, although he could have said it during Gloria's Masquerade and didn't. I don't think either of them see Yuu as a prize or something. This isn't some weird 80s movie, but like, I had a lot of guy friends in high school, and not once would I be like hanging out with any of them, and they'd be like, "We gotta brag about how much fun we had without insert other close guy friend here." It was mostly Aaron being like, "Mari, you gotta play World of Warcraft with us." And I'd be like, "Aaron, I'm not fucking playing World of Warcraft. We've been over this." Maybe other people have had that experience. I know my experiences aren't universal. It's because I haven't experienced that it makes Ace and Deuce's comments seem weirdly competitive. Although I do need to point out they're not completely regarding each other with animosity or anything. They do buy souvenirs for each other and like all of these events, but it still feels like they're trying to make a point of like, oh, we're having fun, just the two of us, or three of us technically, because Grim is there, but anyway. And we need to make sure the one being left out knows we had so much fun without him. Like, it doesn't strike me as an LOL you lost out on having fun with us. To me, it feels more like a pointed thing. But then again, that's up for interpretation. I mean, this whole thing is up for interpretation, which is kind of the point of this video. Anyway, in addition to all of that, we know Ace hates being left out. He talks about it in Spectral Soiree. He complains about being left behind in Glorious Masquerade, and according to Deuce, he was actually mad that he couldn't go to the White Rabbit Fest because he had basketball club activities. This is also why I think him telling you they're gonna brag about hanging out together without Deuce isn't him just being like, LOL, you could have had fun without us, because now he's not getting to hang out with you, and now it's Deuce and you and friends. For Ace, these comments sound like him being happy he's not being the one left out, and it's also not just his competitive streak coming out. Because let's be real here, he, Deuce, Yuu, and Grim are all kind of attached at the hip. If I had a nickel for every time a character mentioned they're always together, I would be filthy rich. They're just those guys on campus. They're more or less a package deal. And I think this being together constantly feeds into Ace's hatred for being left out. They're a quartet, they're always together. If you see one, it's kind of guaranteed the others are going to be close by. And judging from those comments he makes to you when it's him, you, and Grim, I think those days where he's not with the others takes more of a toll on him than he would want to admit. When the four are talking about you potentially returning home, Deuce and Grim are immediately down in the dumps, and Ace is the one to be like, hey, it's gonna be fine, let's work on homework. Ace is absolutely the mood fixer for the group, he's always been like that. So this doesn't seem like a super special line at first, but taking into account that Ace is terrible with communication and deflects a lot, I think this line isn't just him trying to cheer others up. I think he's trying not to think about the day Yuu goes home. We talked about his penchant for deflecting earlier. I think that also plays into this line. He's just trying to avoid the subject so he doesn't have to really think about it. So now that we've done a load of analysis, let me paint a picture for you. Yuu has found a way home. They, Ace, Deuce, and Grim are no longer going to be a quartet. Ace is devastated at losing Yuu, but he'll never admit it. He'll keep it all bottled up. Deuce and Grim are not doing well emotionally, and because Ace and Deuce room together, it's not like Ace is really getting a break from the depressive mood. He doesn't want to seem uncool and mopey, and since he likes to lighten the mood, he's not going to let himself mourn. But it's not like he would say anything to the others anyways. He doesn't like people knowing how much he actually cares. Ace has to couch his kindness in layers of kind of terrible lies and double-edged words. So even if someone asked him if he was doing okay, he would lie and say it was fine. And he thinks to his friend group, it won't be the same after Yuu leaves. Ace doesn't want them to leave. He cares so much, but his lack of communication skills and his tendency to be harsh are making things harder for him. He can't be straightforward and tell Yuu he'll miss them. Not like Deuce does. Ace sees Deuce and Yuu and he wishes he was the closer friend to Yuu. He sees Deuce, his friend, his rival, the one closer to Yuu, and he wishes that were him. He wishes he were the closer friend. But his everything won't let him be vulnerable like Deuce is. Maybe he wasn't as good of a friend as he could have been. It's the day Yuu leaves. Ace is an emotional wreck inside with no outlet at all. The feelings have just been bottled up inside of him. The sadness, the grief, the anger, the loneliness, the jealousy. Everything bubbles over, and in a moment of selfishness, he sabotages their way home. He snaps because his feelings take over and he's been holding everything in for so long that he simply can't hold back anymore. He doesn't want to lose Yuu, and the thought of losing them forever makes him trap them in Twisted Wonderland, even though all Yuu wants is to return home. He can't accept a life without Yuu. He needs Yuu in his life, and he ensures that Yuu is going to stay in Twisted Wonderland forever. In the end, he's a low-key, insecure guy who hates expressing his sincere feelings, and he wants Yuu to stay, so he's going to make it happen. So that's my take on the Traitor Ace theory and trying to make it work. This video took a very long time to make, from researching to just thinking about how this could work. I know a lot of people are probably going to be kind of irritated with my whole analyses, but I'm just going to say, it's all speculative. Like, listen, we're all clowns in the clown car. We might as well have fun with it, you know? But anyways, I really hope you guys enjoyed it. This is my first foray into more video essay-esque content. I've mentioned it before on streams, but I almost exclusively watch video essays on YouTube. I don't actually watch a lot of gaming content. I hope to do more essays like this in the future, and I already have something planned. I don't know if I'll make other theory videos like this. one part going into the theory and then the other video doing my take on it. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to keep this format or go back to the old style. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see y'all later. Thank you everyone for watching, and a very special thank you to my channel members and Twitch subs. Your support helps me to continue to make these videos. If you'd like early access to my videos, consider becoming a channel member. Patrons and Ko-fi members can get my scripts early before I record them. I livestream over on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Thanks again guys, and I'll see y'all later.